Hi, I'm Caroline Lee, and today we are here with Dennis Gillan, the Executive Director of Half a Star Foundation.
Caroline, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
And everybody who's watching, Caroline actually is an intern for the foundation. I'm so glad to have found you and two others through Clemson University. So thank you for joining the team.
Yes, of course. It's been a great experience.
So far, so good. We both don't know what we're doing, but we know what we're doing. We're
We're
selling
learning.
hope every day. We're improving mental health. What is it? Through individuals and organizations by promoting real conversations. That's the mission.
Exactly. Yes.
And that's the goal.
Yes, exactly. Well, I have a few questions to ask you.
Uh-oh.
So, first, just kind of like starting at the base, how does one become a mental health advocate as you are?
I'm glad you asked that question because it's important to stress that I'm not a mental health professional, and I never go out there and say that. I'm not a psychologist, psychiatrist. I'm an advocate, and I try to give a voice. At Have a Sorrow Foundation, we try to give a voice to the folks that don't have a voice, those who are struggling. So I became like an accidental expert, so to speak, through life experiences. I lost my older brother Mark in 1983 to suicide, which is, if you go upstream, it's a mental health issue. And 11 years later, history repeated itself. I got a picture of him right here. Oh, it's staring me in the face. That was my brother Matthew. He was in a car accident. He was in a wheelchair there, but he broke his leg and his back. And 11 years after we lost Mark, we lost Matthew.
Mm.
I just had to pause there. I was rubbing my face, but I'm just trying to get myself together because it's just different when it's your little brother.
Right.
So 11 years later, we lost Matthew to suicide. So that's 2 out of the 5 Gillan kids, and that sucks.
Right. I can imagine. Well, what kind of got you into public speaking about it, and what was like your first few experiences like?
My first 2 experiences were horrible.
Yeah, I can
They're
imagine.
horrible.
Yeah.
They're awful. And the first time I really spoke about it was at a fundraiser, and that went okay. I think, I had to speak for 5 minutes about my brothers, and I never spoke about them before.
Right.
So I did a fundraiser for a good group called the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention Out of the Darkness Walk. I did that. I don't think I did that good, but somebody called me up and said, "Hey, we heard you speak at that walk. Can you come speak at our school?" I went to your rival, University of South Carolina, and I spoke there, but I never heard myself introduced before. And they introduced a guy who lost 2 brothers to suicide, and I started crying.
Right.
That guy's me. I never heard it externally. I always heard it internally, Caroline, but I never heard someone goes, "Hey, today's speaker lost 2 brothers." I'm like sitting there going, "Oh my God, that poor guy." And that poor guy's me.
Mm.
So I cried the entire hour, which wasn't good, but yet they thought it was good. And then I got a call from College of Charleston, staying in South Carolina. I got a call from them. They said, "Hey, we heard you did good at USC." And I'm like, "No, I didn't." And then I did that one. I only cried half the time. And that was my first professional gig, by the way. And here's how I count it. They validated my parking. It's the first time I ever got paid to speak. It was $7.
Mm.
Validated my parking. I came home and I showed it to my family. I said, "I'm a professional speaker. Look, they paid for my parking." And if you know Charleston, parking's a big deal. So
It is. Yeah.
I took it. And then finally, I spoke at Charleston Southern University. That's a school down in, again, North Charleston area. And it's right before I went on, they prayed for me. And I needed that. I was freaking out. It was mandatory. These kids had to show up. And the room held about 220 kids and 300 packed in there. And they're sitting in the rows and the aisles. It was part of their convocation. They literally had to be there. I like to think they were coming to hear me speak, but it was mandatory. It was part of their curriculum. So it was packed. And then for some reason that night, I say for some reason, I know why I hit my stride that night. I was on fire that night. I brought my pastor, and I also, right before I went on, I was freaking out. And if anyone's public speaker, that's like the number one fear. I was freaking out. And right before I went on, they prayed for me. I'm like, "Oh, I needed that." And then I went out there and just, I'd say tore it up. I just poured my heart out, and I was extremely vulnerable, and it worked.
That's
And I get in the
powerful.
car, and I had an hour and a half drive home, Caroline, with my pastor in the car. And I said, "What do you think? You speak for a living. Do I have something with this?" And he said, "Yeah, you got to keep going."
Wow.
And
Hmm.
the path unfolded in front of me.
Do you feel like a particular draw to like speaking to college students? Like, do you think they need to hear this like any more than another age or anything?
That's a great question. It's the college audience for me is an easy audience to get in a room because sometimes if the university hires me, they mandate it. Like for Greek life, you got to be there. For convocation, you got to be there. Now, granted, they don't want to, they don't want to be there, but I love the energy level, and it's the number two suicide's the number two killer for 15 to 24.
Right.
So they need to hear it. Hopefully, it's a lifelong message. If I get them early, they carry it through their life. And the reason I want them to carry it through their life, Caroline, is the worst numbers for suicide are in the 44 to 54-year-old male group, dudes that are at that age. That's my people and higher. And I can't figure out, maybe you can help me as my intern. I can't figure out how to get those folks in a room. We've
Right.
done some men's groups at churches. We've done some men's stuff. I did a barbecue one time. I went to a gym. That's just a very elusive group, and they have the highest, they call it per capita number. They do it per 100,000, and that group's off the chart. With the 15 to 24-year-olds, back to them, a fun group, energetic group, and a group that needs to hear the message. And hopefully one day when they are 44 and 54, they'll remember it,
Yes,
that
definitely.
life is worth living. So,
Yeah. As a college student, I feel like we're being exposed to so many different things so quickly, like so many people, so many different people, that like hearing that I think is really important because if you just go your whole life without hearing any kind of message about mental health, I think that can just not be dangerous, but not helpful for sure.
yeah, and as a college student, you have an interesting lens on this. I'm somewhat removed from college. Somewhat was a kind adjective. Like seriously, it's been a long time. But you all have it rougher. Like I'm of that generation where people, oh, when I was a kid, it was rough. You guys got it rough. I'm telling you right now, this thing ain't helping.
Oh yeah.
There's some pluses and minuses to that social media, but it's not helping what you all did. Like for instance, if I went out when I went to school and I went out and screwed around and I did. Um, I'm 26 years sober, but there's a reason for that.
Mhm.
Nobody filmed it when I was absolutely at my worst. Nobody was out there filming it,
Right.
and it wasn't posted. When I woke up the next morning. So there's a lot of pressures on you all having raised two sons. By the way, they're both out of college. Yay! We had one graduate from
That's
Clemson.
exciting.
Yeah, this month. Um, I'm going to be up the camp that you guys have it rough, and you got to be kind to yourselves. There's so much going on with the social media, good and bad. I'm using a social media program to lose weight. That's good.
Mhm.
Bad is, the FOMO and all that stuff, fear of missing out, and the constant barrage of stuff that you really don't need.
Right. Yeah. Well, another question is when did you kind of realize that this is what you needed to be doing and wanted to do?
Great question, and it actually happened. I went to Chicago to speak to a fraternity of women. There's fraternities out there. Phi Mu was a group. They were, I guess, incorporated before the word sorority was invented. So they're a fraternity. There's a couple of fraternities that are women. Some of our friends have trouble with that concept. I'm like, dude, they were around before the word
Yes.
sorority was even invented. So I went to go speak to Phi Mu in Chicago. And I got there that night. And this is the first time I really traveled. They paid for all my expenses. It's kind of like, wow, this thing's really morphing into this professional thing. And I went and visited the room and I was getting excited. Like I do a lot of prep. I get there early. I went and saw the room and all the chairs were set up. Like 600 women are going to be in this conference. And I'm a guy, I'm like, I don't even know how to speak to one woman. Now I'm going to speak to 600 of them. And I met with the executive director. We went over my presentation that night and they cut my time down a little bit because, and this makes sense, they had a packed agenda. And also some of the board members weren't sure they wanted to talk about this. And I get that. It's a tough subject. I get it. So we pared down my call deck a little bit and I went up there. I said, realizing that I only had a certain amount of time. It was supposed to be this and now it's cut to this. I went for it. I mean, I went on fire because I know my time's short. I'm going to go for it. I poured out my heart. And at the end of the talk, I'm going to tear up thinking about this. They all stood up. First time I ever got a standing ovation. First time. I can trick people into giving me a standing ovation. I do it all the time, but this is the first time they actually legitimately gave me a standing ovation. And some of the board members, as I was walking off, were hugging me as I was walking off the dais. And I stepped down off the stairs and I'm sweating. I mean, I went for it. And
Right.
I just remember hearing, spiritual guy, but I just remember feeling like this is the first time my life really had a good purpose.
Mm.
Like I was, well done, my good and faithful servant was ringing in my head. So I was walking back to get my, to sit down, and I'm sweating. I was drenched. I went for it. And at the break, it must have hit a nerve. They were standing up clapping. That was a blur. I was kind of crying anyway. So I just went back and sat down. And at the break, I stood up to leave, and there was a line of people that wanted to talk to me.
Wow. Mm.
That's never happened before. Like, I was like, they'd say, hey, I want to thank you for what you did. And then they would tell me their stories. So the minute I was vulnerable, these wonderful people were revealing their vulnerabilities to me in confidence. And I was sitting there going, wow, you should give the talk. Some of the stories these people tell me on the road are unbelievable. And it was really nice to see, I sat there like, wow, it was a pretty long line. Like, they're here to hear me. It just blew my mind. That's when I remember getting in the air, leaving that place. I took a cab to the airport. I remember taking a train out to O'Hare. I'm sitting there going, I think this is going to work.
Yeah. Helping people, impacting them. I feel like that's amazing.
That is, and
Yeah.
you nailed it there, Caroline. You can get everything you want in life if you help others get what they want. The minute I took myself out of the equation and started telling the story, things started popping.
Mm-hmm. Well, the foundation, if we want to talk about that a little bit, it just launched this December. So,
Yes.
why launch a foundation? What made you even think of that or come up with that?
I'm laughing because it was we wanted to launch it for Giving Tuesday in December. So I'm laughing because it was a lot of work, rush, the website, all this stuff. But the initial genesis of a foundation was one time I got a call from a school, and we couldn't make it work financially. It was down in Texas, and I've told this story before. I just couldn't make it work. I don't want to get rich doing this, but I also don't want to get broke doing this. I'm going to sell this message of hope. And that bugged me to no end. I hung up the phone. I remember sitting there going, I never said no before. I never said no. We always work it out. Someone will pay me, like a corporation will pay me, and then I'll go to a college or a charity. It always worked out. And this time it didn't. I sat there thinking, wow, if I had some backers or some supporters, and people always asking, how can I help you? I was like, I wasn't set up for this. So now I set up through the IRS, a nonprofit, 501c3. I'm learning a lot this way so people can donate. They get the tax write-off.
Mm-hmm.
But what we get to do then is at Half a Sorrow Foundation is call that school back up in Texas and say, what do you need? And part of the launch so far, I've been on the phone all morning, as I said to a lot of people through Instagram and somewhere I posted, I'm doing the talk for free
Mm-hmm.
in January. Just, let's throw it out there. Let's spread the message because of the kindness of these donors. I can do that. Where before I used to work, worry about, you got to get paid, you got to do this, you got bills to pay, the light bill, maybe I don't have to worry about that so much. Let me just go do the message. And then not being on the road we're doing a lot of this through Zoom. We can develop, and you're helping me with this, develop different programming,
Right.
impact more people. So it's kind of nice. The pandemic did offer us an opportunity for a great timeout, the great pause, as we call it, to start this. And this idea that was noodling around in my head finally came to fruition. So the Half a Sorrow Foundation is live and kicking. As you know, you're one of 3 interns now helping this thing go. And we've raised some money, and we're doing it. We're just going. We're onward and upward. And literally this morning, I took 2 calls about the offer to do the talk for free. And, one's in DC area, and the other one's, Charleston, the other one, gosh, I'm thinking of Oklahoma, North Carolina,
Wow.
South Dakota. These people reached out. So that's where social media is good, right?
Yeah.
We put it
Right.
out there and said, hey, let us know. And I expect to get a lot more, and I'm fine with that. I
Right.
can't wait to do it. I need people that need to hear this message of hope, especially after what 2020 dealt us.
Yes, especially after this year. Oh, been a tough one. But where did Half a Sorrow, the name, come from?
It's an old Swedish proverb, and it's always been in my talk. I don't know where I heard this. You hear this stuff a million times, and then finally it hits you. I was in my car and I heard the Swedish proverb. It was on some radio station. Someone just said, a shared joy is a double joy. A shared sorrow is half a sorrow. And I sat there like, wow, why did it take me so long to hear this? Now I probably heard it previous in my life. I just never clicked.
Right.
So a shared joy is a double joy. A shared sorrow is half a sorrow. And what we want to do, we, you, me, the team,
Mm-hmm.
is go out there, be vulnerable, let people have a forum where they could share their sorrow, because when you share your sorrow, you cut it in half and half. And what I always say in my talk is a half of a half of a half of a half. Will I ever get to zero? No. There'll always be something. And that means there's always something remaining, my brothers. And that means they were important to me. And that's okay.
I
So
like that.
that's what it came.
Yeah.
Great question.
Do you have any funny stories from the road or like a favorite experience? Anything that like you want
Let's
to
go with favorite. I'm going to come back to funny because the funny ones just crack me up. The favorite is when I speak uh, and I do my preparation, and I've done this a couple of universities, will bring students up on stage that have been vetted about safe messaging, and they tell their story about mental health issues. Did one up the road here at Furman, did it twice, brought 3 kids up on stage because it's halfway through the presentation. Said, you're tired. You're probably tired of listening to this old guy. Let's bring one of you up. Now we practice it. We
right.
go over it. We brought them up there. We did it at University of Delaware. That's one of my favorites, when the kids see one of their kids. A fellow student gets up there and says, "This is what I'm dealing with." And the place, it's funny because I always said, when I introduce them, I said, "Listen, here's the deal. They're going to come up here. You're going to clap your rear ends off. They're going to tell their story, and then you're going to clap your rear ends off again." And it's unbelievable, the reception of the other students in the audience when these kids do it. It's unbelievable. I'm usually over there crying, wiping my eyes. One, on the story, and then how the peers accepted them, because that person did a very brave thing and got up there and said, "This is my name. This is what I'm dealing with."
Mm.
Happened a couple of times. The University of Delaware, it happened at, and we're outdoors, and this kid, gosh, all 3 of them nailed it. And I remember going on stage going, as a professional speaker, you should never bring anyone better than you up on stage. And I did it 3 times.
Wow.
The stories are amazing. So that's my favorite, when I get to bring somebody in the loop. When I do corporate gigs, I get to bring their employee assistance program in the loop. I like doing that because that's, the onus is not on me anymore. It's on them. It's always on the audience. And it feels like I'm really helping at this point, really helping. These are stories that you can relate to. Some of the funny stuff is nobody wants to come to my talk. And one of the funniest stories I have is at University of Kentucky. I'm doing an all male, which is I needed to do. It's 76%, 78% of all completed suicides are men.
Mm.
Caroline, you're not off the hook. Women have more attempts. So we're all in this together. So I'm doing a talk for just these fraternity guys. It's the worst audience on the planet, but I love it because I was one of them. I get it. Who wants to go see this? So it's mandatory. They have to be there. So right before the talk, I have that little microphone on and I go outside. I usually do this right before I go on stage. I disappear. And I tell the handler, I'm going to go get in my, get out of my head, get ready for this, get pumped up, pray a little bit, pray a lot, and say, all right, let's go. And I come out, I'm ready. So I was going outside and I was holding the door for these kids that were coming in. They were coming in droves. It was big time. This theater was getting packed. And I'm just holding the door. I can't get out of holding the door. You ever do that? You hold the door and then you're standing there for a while.
Yeah.
And this kid walks by, doesn't understand that I'm the speaker. He might have thought maybe I was like the janitor holding the door up, And he just said to his buddy, he goes, "I can't wait till this blank is over." It's the best word. Right in front of the speaker. "I can't wait till it's over." And I was rolling. Younger Dennis Gillan would have, maybe got my temper up a bit. I thought it was hilarious because that's what I would have said when I was his age. So I totally used it in my introduction when it came out. I said, I get it. I didn't out him publicly. So I was standing out there. I heard this. I get it. That one cracked me up.
Right. That's funny. He had no clue.
No clue.
Well, where do we go from here? Where can people help if they want to get in touch with you for a possible speaking? How do they do that?
Sure. On the website, and it's funny because I have 2 websites now, which is weird. I'm moving away from the DennisGillan.com website.
Okay.
You can reach me there, but I'm moving to the Half a Sorrow Foundation website. So that's probably the best way. halfasorrow.org.
Okay.
halfasorrow.org or dennis@halfasorrow.org is my email. reach out through any of the social medias that we have out there, thanks to your efforts. Um, and just let me know what you want to do, because we're going to do a lot in 2021. There's a lot of program we're going to do. We're going to do more and more talks. Right now, the offer for the free talk is going crazy. Again, thanks to the kindness of the donors. And if people want to join that kindness pool, it is end of year. And this is an area I'm not very comfortable with, raising money, but it helps the mission. No money, no mission.
Exactly.
If you want to help, and one of your superpowers is writing a check or using a credit card, we'll take it and we'll put it to good use. That's a fact. Some people go, what are you gonna do with the money? Money makes people goofy, but I drive a car. One of my Mazda I drive has 240,000 miles on it. Money is not the motivator,
Right.
but we need it to
Definitely.
go out and motivate others, to consider that life is worth living. So that's how they can help.